The director of the finance department wanted to cut travel expenses for trade shows but ended up costing the company $2 million in losses. Many years ago, I worked for a company that hired an incredibly incompetent financial organization. When the management first decided to clean things up, honestly, this story is more about my boss than about me. We had a travel team, a group of volunteers from the sales and IT departments who would go out in full force with equipment and technicians to set up booths, demonstrations, and network at trade shows. Some shows were in big cities, and you could go to events from suppliers, parties, and hang out with the salespeople who, for some reason, were mostly fun-loving drinkers. We had a kind of seniority system for who could go on a business trip, but no one really complained, and everyone got their turn. You went to DevCon last year, now it's my turn. Okay, fair enough. The travel team coordinator was also a volunteer position, but it was usually someone with a higher rank, like a manager. He handled organizational matters, equipment delivery, rentals, expenses, travel plans, payment for exhibition space. He also got a lot of freebies from our partner sales departments, which he would then pass on to the team for all participants. This was a kind of bonus. But when the new director of finance came in, she introduced a bunch of new, strict rules. Some of them were as follows: the team was not entitled to reimbursement of expenses without company approval. By the way, now no one got approval after the trip. The team could not have its own credit card, not even a corporate one. They were given gift cards with a fixed amount, for example, $150, which had to be spent on all expenses. Unfortunately, the places where we needed them, airlines, car rentals, hotels, gas stations, toll roads, did not accept gift cards. The finance department denied they were gift cards and even forbade mentioning the word in meetings. We were told to say pre-approved credit balance or something like that. But for the rest of the world, they were 100% ordinary gift cards with the same restrictions. Next, no matter how far in advance you asked for something to be approved, the finance department almost always delayed until the last minute. And usually after a dozen reminders, which caused extra costs, expedited shipping, same-day rental penalties, inflated airfare prices. If they forgot to do something, it was your fault or your manager's fault because you didn't remind them often enough. You reminded them 4 times to buy plane tickets for the team, but they didn't do it. You should have reminded them 5 times, so it's your fault. And all this was because of the finance director's assertion that such measures would reduce the level of fraud, although we had never had any. She had a Dolores Umbridge-like approach, thinking someone, somewhere, might be indulging themselves. She was a bitch with a self-satisfied smirk. She would annoyingly shake her head when she condescendingly explained something to you. So we'll call her Dolores. For her, the travel team was just submitting receipts and getting reimbursed. Dolores shut that down, claiming that the team coordinator was just blowing everything on steaks and wine. He, of course, told her to fuck off and quit. In his absence, Dolores presented all the gifts from suppliers as a prime example of theft and freebies, which she had supposedly put an end to. Oh yes, behold the great scoundrel, sitting on a throne of American Express stress balls and free catalogs. In the end, these duties fell to my manager. He had never been on business trips and didn't really know how things worked, and therefore didn't question Dolores until he went on a trip with the team himself. He was surprised that he didn't have an expense account or a corporate card. When he asked for one, he was given a gift card. He tried to use it, and it didn't work almost anywhere except in some restaurants. He paid for everything else with his personal American Express card, including expenses for the whole team, and was denied reimbursement because he didn't get prior approval. He was out more than $40,000 for a 2-week trip. Of course, he complained to senior management. Dolores threatened to quit if she wasn't allowed to do her job, and the top managers hadn't dealt with her before and were quite passive, not wanting to be the bad guys. Well, she says you can use the gift cards. When my manager explained that they were declined everywhere, Dolores said, he just didn't try hard enough, he's afraid of conflict. He needs to be a big boy and stand up for his rights. In the end, under pressure from the lawyers, the management did reimburse his expenses. After that, Dolores arranged for certain things to be paid for in advance: hotels, tickets, truck rentals, shipping. But everything was done at the last minute. For example, they tried to book hotel rooms or cars on the day a major event started. Naturally, everything was already booked, or they booked the wrong hotel. Washington, D.C. is not Washington State. Or a package that could have been sent for $40 was sent for $250 because they delayed until the last minute. The finance department also didn't understand how much anything cost and how we saved money by doing everything ourselves. Sometimes, things were a complete mess. The team would arrive at a hotel to find that the finance department hadn't entered the payment information, for example, for the security deposit that almost all hotels require, and no one could reach them. So again, all expenses went on employees' personal cards. And again, Dolores said they just shouldn't believe what the hotel administrator, the union at the trade show, or the stupid guy with a minimum wage at the toll booth says. They need to fight. We don't have to babysit these people if they're afraid of conflict. Have you ever argued with a toll booth worker on a New Jersey highway? She hadn't either. No, after 2 such disasters, my manager said, enough. No one is volunteering for these events anymore. I won't approve time off for this. He refused to be the trip coordinator in the future because he simply couldn't afford it. It was an unpopular decision, to say the least, but he told us, just wait. Let her do things her way. He was a master of passive-aggressive sabotage. And without resistance, Dolores went into 5th gear with her smug grin. Now we will work like a real company. And that led to the next problem. Some business trips were to big cities like Chicago, New York, Washington, and so on. Dolores started whining again that everyone was flocking there to have a corporate binge at the company's expense. The management feebly objected, well, yes. Otherwise we won't have any volunteers, but Dolores wasn't satisfied. Then she decided to introduce a lottery among the employees. Anyone could apply to participate in a business trip, and she would supposedly randomly choose who would go to make everything fair. This fairness, by the way, suspiciously often skewed in favor of her own subordinates, but we'll get to that. The point of these trade shows was not at all to have a vacation, as Dolores always claimed. She never understood why we even went there, to grow the business. IT people should go to such events to install and set up equipment, and sales staff to communicate and network. But this idea never entered her mind. And since the very IT specialists and technicians who were already forbidden to go didn't want to pay for everything themselves, we just stopped volunteering. As a result, the team started to include random employees from other departments who had no idea how to work at a trade show, how to behave, or what to do at all. And it turned into a disaster. Imagine an assistant from the marketing department on the 5th floor wins a trip and suddenly finds out that she has to pay for everything out of her own pocket. And Dolores always sent someone from her own team along to keep an eye on everyone. But they also didn't know how trade shows worked. They only knew how to agree with Dolores and tolerate her control mania. What's a union fee? What's a corkage fee? No, we didn't give any union permission to connect our electricity. Just plug the cord from the booth into the outlet. They won't let us? Who are they? Well, we don't need to use the screens in the booth. We're not selling TVs. Did you know that if you have a conflict with the convention center union and you refuse their services, they still bill you, but at the maximum rate? Yes, Dolores and her team didn't know that either. And believe me, paying those guys a couple of $1,000 in advance is much cheaper than paying fines later. Of course, she tried to fight it because she wasn't afraid of conflict, but she lost spectacularly. The irony is that despite all of Dolores' assurances to the contrary, the non-IT and non-sales people who did go really did treat it as a company-paid vacation, just as she had feared. It became a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. At first, they were shocked that they had to work, and then when the others found out, no one else applied for the lottery. So there were no volunteers at all. And then Dolores started sending interns. Interns! You could write a whole novel about this nightmare. Imagine sending a crowd of students to Vegas, telling them they have to pay for everything themselves, and then putting them in a work environment where they are guaranteed to screw up. I'm sure many laws were broken back then. After that, Dolores started sending chaperones with them, again, her henchmen from the finance department. As a result, the company incurred huge fines for all sorts of violations, including bailing out the interns. The interns got into trouble so often that Dolores started hiring floor monitors in the hotels, and adults had to work on their feet at the trade shows all day and then report back to their rooms. She also housed 4 to 6 people in one room, as if it were a school orchestra. She even bought breathalyzers to make sure no one was drinking. For adults, she treated adults like this. The sales department called it all a PR disaster, and my boss said, wait, just wait. Let her drown herself. In the very first year, travel expenses increased by more than you heard that right, by 4,000%. Trips that used to cost $3,600 now cost $144,000 and more, mainly due to fines and rush surcharges. Annual expenses grew from $110,000 to over 2-point-something million. Due to the complete chaos, we lost a bunch of booked booths and the rights to renew them, meaning we missed half of the trade shows and looked like idiots in front of our clients. And the main point of participating in these shows was networking. So now it just made no sense to go. The sales department repeatedly pointed this out to Dolores, but she only doubled down in response. And a year later, she just canceled the travel team. Eventually, management intervened. They fought with Dolores for a whole year until she left for personal reasons or to devote herself to her family. Then it took almost 2 years to rebuild the team from scratch. People got corporate cards again. The role of travel coordinator became a full-time position, and when we hired a new person for this position, he took over all the financial issues. It got much better, and in the first year, he saved the company a ton of money, and there was general rejoicing. So, a few edits based on popular questions. Why wasn't she fired when expenses went from $110,000 to $2.1 million? There are several reasons, but the main one is she was the CFO. I think she smoothed over all the mistakes in her reports. Besides, we had great years in the early 2000s. If we made $2 million one year and $3 million the next, the losses might have gone unnoticed until someone realized that it should have been $6 million. That's my theory based on what happened later. Dolores was friends with 2 top managers, and rumor has it she had a heart-to-heart with them about the company's financial situation. That's how she got hired for the second year. Several directors resigned, including friends of the management, who later took us out for drinks and told us the whole inside story. And the problems with the trade shows were just one of her screw-ups. She also screwed up one of the key supply channels, dumped the market, made a couple of enemies, nearly destroyed the company, and gave competitors some of the most profitable supplier contracts, violating an antitrust agreement. There was a lot more, but that involves specific people, which I don't have the right to talk about. What happened to the Christmas party? The Christmas party wasn't particularly interesting. Or rather, it just didn't happen. This was closer to the end of this whole saga. Now we will work like a real company, but as soon as the travel budget grew from $110,000 to $2.1 million, the party apparently fell to the very bottom of her priority list. I'm not even sure she knew it needed to happen. Some people think she was diverting money from there to hide the colossal spending on the trade show screw-ups, but I doubt the budgets came from the same source. Sometime in November, people started asking, don't we have a New Year's party every year? But no one knew who was in charge of it. Usually, it was handled by 3 employees who had left the company the previous year, mostly because of Dolores. Although they didn't organize it themselves, they hired contractors, and it was held in some expensive hotel. Our fiscal year is from January to December, so December is a crunch time on all fronts. And for Dolores, this was her first full fiscal year. She came at the end of the previous one, so finances were already a mess. How was she fired? She just made too many enemies in the company. It took some time, but after a year and a half of work, she had accumulated so much negativity that she couldn't move forward in any direction. A powerful passive resistance began. This completely threw her off balance, and she tried to stage some kind of internal coup that no one supported. And in the end, she was, to put it mildly, not in her right mind. When 2 years had passed since her arrival, she started taking creative leave until one of them became permanent. Her assistant temporarily took her place but was also later fired. And then they brought in a consulting group that created a new finance department. They were the ones who suggested making the position of travel coordinator a full-time, paid position. The woman they hired for this role was just amazing. Is it true that she tried to sell company merch? Dolores was shocked that we just gave away stickers, pens, t-shirts, and keychain flashlights at trade shows. As a servant of the company, she demanded that we charge at least a symbolic price for them. But as far as I understand, no one followed her order. I distinctly remember her sending out a memo in which she complained that many keychains were missing and she saw them on employees' desks. They cost the company money, and she wanted to charge employees $3 a piece. Rumor has it she wanted to charge visitors at the trade shows And now, on to the next story. Story 2. The boss secretly wanted to fire me. It didn't work out. My boss secretly wanted to fire me and have me train my own replacement, but I was warned about his plans. The cast names are of course changed. Bob, the then boss, an elderly man, not tech-savvy, but has been with the company for a long time, which is why he became my boss. Hans, the hero of this story, a school friend, works at the same company but in a different department and in management. He was the one who helped me get this job 4 years ago. Carolina, a colleague, not exactly a star, but makes up for it with diligence. Carl, a regular employee, has been with the company for about 6 years, mainly servicing old clients. He has a family, he's always busy. And me, well, I'm me. A guy in his late 20s, a bit of a nerd, I love computers. Our company was small, and our team of 3 was something like tech support for clients, but with extended functionality. I usually helped set up databases and sometimes advised clients on whether it would be beneficial for them to change their plan, for example. Like in any tech support, we received tickets from clients and dealt with them one by one. I liked complex tasks and tried to work hard on them, and Carolina, as it turned out, liked more standard tasks. She preferred to do what she already knew instead of facing something new every day. Nothing wrong with that. In the end, we worked well together and had unwritten rules about who takes which tickets, and everyone won: me, Carolina, the company, and the client. But then we got a new boss, Bob, and he immediately noticed that I was handling fewer tickets than Carolina. I tried to explain to him that not all tickets are equal in terms of effort, but since he wasn't very tech-savvy, he simply didn't understand half of what I was doing. About a month later, we got a huge new client, and I spent a week at their office setting up databases and everything they needed. Because of this, my average ticket numbers for the month dropped even more. Well, it's obvious why. If Bob had at least one working neuron, he would have figured it out himself. And then he said something I never expected. He said we needed help and he got approval to hire a 4th team member. I was happy, as was everyone else. We had this new big client, and the company was growing fast in general. Overall, it all sounded logical. He even specifically asked me to handle the selection of candidates and the training of the new employee. Apparently, he realized that he had no idea what we were doing, and I didn't mind. That same day, Hans calls me, which is strange because he usually texts, not calls. He says, "Come over to my place tomorrow. I have some beer that urgently needs company." The next day, I went to his place. We just chatted about life. We see each other about once a month and have many mutual friends, but this time it was just the 2 of us, no company, drinking beer. After a couple of bottles, he says he updated his resume yesterday and that everyone should keep an updated resume handy. He asks, "Do you have an updated one?" I immediately sensed a trick and said, "No, why? Do you know something you want to share with me?" He replied, "Well, I'm just saying you should always have a resume handy. But of course, I can't tell you that Bob is thinking of firing you, but I also can't say that he's not thinking of firing you." I thanked him for the beer and left soon after. So, I realized I was going to be fired, and most likely, Bob had just asked me to hire my own replacement, train this person to do my job, and then hand over my position to them. This is where the sweet moment of malicious compliance begins. I fully comply with the instruction to hire a 4th team member, and I choose someone who perfectly fits Bob's idea of who performs the most tickets. That is, I'm looking for a not-so-smart person with a careless attitude who doesn't give a damn about the client. After all, when Bob talked about my tickets, he was completely uninterested in client satisfaction. A bunch of applications for the vacancy come in. There are good ones among them, but I immediately screen them out. I choose resumes with a lot of mistakes and minimal experience in the field. These are the people I invite for an interview. The interview stage was more difficult because now Bob and someone from HR were sitting next to me, but I was the one asking most of the questions and giving my opinion on the candidates. And since I had already screened out the good ones, Bob chose the best of the worst, and in my opinion, not even the best one. One candidate was pretty good, but I asked him nonsensical questions, and when he couldn't answer them, I made him look like a complete idiot. "Sorry, John." I suggested one candidate whom Bob eventually chose because he would work very quickly and handle a lot of tickets. By that time, I already had a new job lined up that started in 4 months, but I wanted Bob to fire me himself for the fat severance package. After 2 months of training Mr. Newbie, I only taught him the basic tickets. He handled them quickly but made a lot of mistakes, and the complex tasks just piled up in the queue. Carl noticed this, since after I was fired, only he would be able to take them. I let him in on my plan. As luck would have it, he had just received an offer from another company. Carl couldn't stand Bob either and decided he would accept the offer but could wait a couple of weeks to quit right after me for maximum effect. Then I informed Bob that I had finished training the newbie, and a week later, he tells me with regret that he has to fire me because my performance hasn't improved. He actually called me out for handling few tickets while I was training another person. What the fuck, Bob? He even wished me luck in finding a new job with my work ethic. This was the day I had been waiting for, and I just thanked Bob and reminded him that I was now entitled to 4 months of severance pay and also 2 months of unused vacation, which also had to be paid. As I was leaving, I told Carl about it, and he opened his desk drawer, took out a signed 2-week resignation letter, and headed to Bob's office. My girlfriend happened to have vacation time left, and we decided to take off to New Zealand for 4 weeks the following week. That's where I proposed to her. A month after returning from New Zealand, I started my new job with a pay raise and a great boss. I thanked Hans again for the warning, and he kept me updated on how my former department rapidly fell apart. Later, Bob himself was fired. When that happened, I was even offered his position, but I refused, although it would have been the perfect moment of revenge. About 5 years later, that is, last year, Hans and I founded our own company. We did pretty much the same thing, but in a different city, and so far everything is going great. Well, that's all the stories. I'm waiting for your opinions on them in the comments. And maybe you have some similar stories too. Thank you for watching this video to the end. Watch our previous video, which you will see right here. And good luck to you.